Okay, in today's video, I'm going to be going over combat balancing. This is a part two on my blog, just going kind of more into detail about how we've been balancing combat in Windwalker. Um, and the most recent thing I've been working on is using this spreadsheet that I've created to adjust these damage multipliers. Essentially, after testing combat a few times and fixing some of the bugs, um, I went ahead and looked at how much damage different skills are doing based on their class, what their passive abilities are, um, what kind of items they're using, and trying to figure out, oh, do these numbers make sense? And passives actually are something that I need to revisit as a next step, but for today, I'll just be going over um, modifying combat, balancing things, and um, balancing skills specifically. So, essentially, a big change that I made currently um, was adjusting damage values for different types of offensive abilities. And we have different types of skills here, but I was mainly focused on offensive abilities as well as summons. But as you can see, offensive abilities being the majority of the skills, um, and then the other ones we don't have as many. So essentially, abilities that we're targeting um, all all characters on the opposing side, we're dealing too much damage. In most cases, offensive. So I call them target all abilities. And target all abilities were doing more damage individually than single target damage skills were. So single target, let's say it hits one target, so it should essentially do more damage to that target on average when compared to a target all ability dealing damage to two or three different characters. So that wasn't the case for a lot of these things. So to balance that, I either lowered the damage that these target all skills are doing, or increased the damage or effect of single target abilities. Um, and in some cases, I made quite drastic increases and decreases. I also noticed that the knight had three skills that could stun an enemy, which I felt was a bit too much. So I um, removed one of those skills or one of those status effects and changed it from a stun to an expose over here, as well as increase and decrease the chance to stun for some skills. Skills you see in bold are something that needs to be revisited. Um, let's see. But yeah, so I have this average damage multiplier here. For a single target ability, that's pretty easy to do. For example, let's do Lacerate 1.5 to 2.5. Just get the midpoint there, which is 2. For target all abilities, essentially just add them together, and that usually works to add the ranges together. Is the average. Um, yeah, or you get like the midpoint divided time multiplied by 2, which is usually the average. Um, yeah, so those are the changes I made for offensive abilities. And then for summons, we see here, I called it technical effect. It's probably could probably call that something better, like a technical description or something. Um, but essentially, some of these descriptions were actually not in line with what was actually occurring. Um, so I made some code changes to make sure that this description was actually accurate. So for example, 1x magic elemental damage as fizz damage, which means take 100% of the summoners or the players' magic and elemental damage and convert it over to physical damage for this summon. Um, and in addition to that, take 50% of the player's magic elemental damage and then convert that to magic damage for the summon as well. And then 1x HP means 100% of the player's HP, convert that over to the summon's ability as well. One thing that I actually did add for all summons is um, defense stats. So previously, in accordance with these descriptions, these summons had this much HP, however much HP it was supposed to scale off um, the player's HP. But I noticed that at higher levels, these summons were in fact getting a lot of HP, but they were taking massive amounts of damage, um, which, yeah, you could argue that, oh yeah, you could just balance that, just give them more HP, but it just kind of didn't feel consistent with kind of how the game felt in combat. So I just made it kind of simple. However much defense the player has is how much the summons are going to have. And that might be something that needs to be addressed later. But for now, um, it's definitely a buff for the summons because they're getting defenses where they weren't getting before. But this is also something that's going to be tested a bit more and iterated on, and see how things go from there. So these skills actually have not been updated in the game. Um, we just have to regenerate the skills again, and that should be fine. But currently, it's just we're gonna make more changes, so no real point in regenerating currently. This is a video that I just made showcasing combat 2v3 um, level 50, where the player has not great items, but somewhat decent items. If you're talking about in rarity, our system goes from rarity levels 0 to 4, so 5 different rarities, and this is a player that has 6 items at rarity level 2. Um, so I'm just going to play this. I don't think you guys can hear the sound, but oh yeah. So before I play this, actually, while testing combat, it's important to test the full experience, or as much of the full experience as I can do. Um, Being a game focused on creating multiple unique encounters, not multiple, an almost near infinite amount of combat encounters. Um, that makes testing difficult, especially if you're trying to do it manually. So what's helpful is creating a set of debug tools or editor tools that allow us to um, better test that feel, do it faster, um, do it as one-to-one as you can get. Um, those things are important. So what you see here is um, a random pet that was generated based on the player's current level. That's a debug tool. Obviously, when you're actually playing the game, you're going to be purchasing pets with the gold you acquire as you're playing the game, etc. This heal player, heal enemies usually isn't necessary, but in some instances where I'm like, oh, I'm dying too fast, I really want to test it to see if this ability is working. That's super helpful. Another debug tool that I mentioned before was this equip items button where I can choose the rarity of a specific item that I want for my player, choose the type of it, choose what level it is at, and equip them on the fly. Um, all those things really helpful for testing. Let's see what else. Yeah, I think that's it. We can play it. I'll just go slowly. I'll probably pause a few times just to explain what's happening. So this is the knight class at level 50. Yeah, and I guess just a brief intro. The knight class is a advancement from the warrior class at level 30, um, which is focused mainly on like crowd control abilities, high defense stats, uses the shield, sword, etc. Just standard, typical like knight paladin type of class. We've done some combat balancing, adjusting some skills. And then I'm going to be
Actually
adjusting
haven't
my items
regenerated the
so that I
skills,
actually
so
have
the
enough
changes
mana
are not
to
live in
cast
this
these
current
abilities.
demo.
But we can just kind of see here what combat looks like at level 50 with the player and the pet that's been randomly generated. And
in
the
a
pets
2
also
versus
have
3 combat
abilities and
situation.
behavior as well.
So here,
So different abilities
looks like I
based
don't have
on
enough
what type
mana
of
to
pet it
cast
is.
these spells first.
I'm going to go ahead and see what items I have equipped on the player. And one thing that I need to add is, well, we actually have the UI to show you what each skill is, but we just haven't
It's a little bit more balanced.
really
less HP,
focused
more
on
mana. Just randomly generating
I
items
guess
until
implementing how to display
I can
that to the
actually
player.
cast my abilities here.
It looks like I have enough mana
let's
now.
try to stun our enemies here.
That's an ability that's target all abilities that is stun. This is pre-balance, so you can see it's doing
And
a
one
lot
thing
more
that's
damage than it probably should.
obvious that we need
Almost
to
one-shotting
add is
the entire board
over there.
And then now the enemies
UI
will take a turn.
that tells the player what these skills do.
You can see here it's on
There
cooldown.
is
This is something that was
cooldown
newly added.
UI effect here, just graying out
Number of
what the
turns
skill
it'll
is,
take for it to
and then
reset,
telling you
and then
a
it's
timer
it's grayed out.
when you can use that ability again. So this guy looks like he's almost done or almost dead. I'm gonna use this
that skill
ability
is a
that
single
actually
target
heals
ability
you,
that will heal you,
as well as doing damage. Did a crit there.
crit over there. The heal was in white. The
Didn't heal
text
too much,
obviously
looked
needs to
like.
change color. He attacked and missed. There's a little bit of a delay in animation
Nice.
there. The pet killed off the
And the
weakest
guy.
one, which is actually something that our AI behavior will do is target enemies that are lower most of the time. Not always, but most of the time.
Easy.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So that was fairly simple. The Knight class currently has a lot of defense. Yes, it has more HP as well. And you can see here, it's like, okay, we're trying to tell the player, use the shield because we're going to give you more stats. So currently we allow any class to use any items. And we're trying to, on the design side, kind of push players to use items that more fit their class's niche, I guess. So Berserker, you get bonuses for using two-handed melee weapons, or for melee 15% melee weapons, 30% for two-handed. Blah blah blah. You can for the spell sword, you can wield a wand on the offhand slot. Marksman, bow, use a bow, you'll do more damage. Beastmaster, you can kind of use whatever you want. Elementalist, wands and staves give you bonus stats. Yeah, so these things we might change a bit. But yeah, so I was talking about the balancing. This is a link to my blog and the three different systems that kind of tie in together to balancing. Yeah, so I can briefly go over this. So essentially, in combat, you have the player, or I'll start with items. You have the player and the monsters. So this is I think this is a pretty good example of explaining how I balanced it. But essentially, I created this metric called the power level that essentially determines how powerful something is. And that's always going to be correlated to the 38 different stats that we have. So the simplest explanation is the four primary stats, strength, intelligence, dexterity, and constitution. And each of those by itself doesn't do anything, but strength gives you a little bit of HP, it gives you physical damage, it gives you a little bit of defense. And just to give another example, intelligence gives you magic damage. It gives you magic regeneration or MP regeneration, magic defense. Um, doesn't give crit chance anymore, but it gives these primary stats give you essentially secondary stat bonuses that actually do affect the player um, via either offensive capabilities, defensive capabilities, dodge chance, crit chance, etc. And these things make a character stronger. And then these stats are obviously going to be found in items. As the player levels up, they're going to gain base stat bonuses. So, for example, here I wrote they gain 4 power level per level from 0 to 10. So, 0 to 10, they're a novice. They don't know what class they're going to be. They can't choose a primary class. So, they just gain a static +1 to each primary stat. And then from there, based on what class they choose, they're going to gain slightly more, so 2 more per level. And then at level 31 or level 30, they'll be gaining um, even more than that. So I can very accurately estimate how much power level they would gain per level. And at max level, they would gain 720. Um, Similarly with items, I obviously control item generation, and I know what the average power level is for a given item at a given rarity at a given level. So here's just an average of items at level 1 through 10, 11 to 20, and then so on and so forth. And you can see it increasing as the level goes up. And this is kind of intentional design. At first, the items are going to be not that different from each other and not that great either. And then once you actually find a class, you'll see that, oh, these items are actually a bit stronger than they were. And at each level, they are getting progressively better. And then you have this kind of period where things don't get much better. Um, a lot of it kind of stays a bit stagnant here at 41 to 70. And then once you hit max level, the average power level you gain for each item um, changes a decent amount. And this is because at level 100 or at items at level 100 get an additional multiplier to these stats, um, which in the design I was trying to, I guess, push for max level items are just that much better. So they're going to have more stats on average. Um, but yeah, having explained that, we can essentially just sum up, okay, what's the average item level or item, what's the average power level for an item at level 15? Let's just say it's 15 times 1.9, which is roughly like 30, 29, something like that. And then from here, you could do, okay, I'm getting 6 times 15. What is that? I think that's 90. So 90 plus 29 is 119. Um, so player at level, I think I said 15 is going to have around 120 power level. So I could easily just, yeah, I did that exact calculation here. Um, yeah, 70, 29. Yeah, okay. So my calculation was wrong, but um, yeah, we could generate a stats for a monster that has power level around the same. Base stats as well as item stats. And then I explained that it doesn't work well in practice because power level by itself isn't a good metric for monster generation. And this is because monsters could have higher power levels, but maybe only because its mana was high or its dodge chance or resistances. Meaning that, yeah, a monster can have, I don't know, 1,000 power level, but what if the 999 of that was just in mana itself? Um, then that wouldn't really do anything for the monster. And when I'm actually in combat with that monster, I would either one shot it or it would like one shot me or something like that if it just got physical damage or something. Um, So I say here really vaguely that I created like smart allocation of stats. And I went over this before in previous blog posts, but that actually means is um, out of every monster prefab that we have, I did set kind of what their base stats are based on their levels. And then from there, I categorized those monsters, or I guess I bucketized them into buckets of different characteristics. Like if it's a bat, then it's going to be more dexterous in nature. So um, it could roll a certain amount of or certain types of stats like dexterity, like crit chance, like physical damage, blah blah blah, things like that. Um, and then I also tagged the likelihood of those stats to be chosen. So of the 38 different stats, I said, okay, here are the stats that can be rolled for this specific monster, and here's the likelihood that it would be rolled. Um, and then using our monster generator, it would kind of iterate and add those stats um, at each iteration. And if a duplicate stat was found, it would try to roll again. And if again it rolled that same stat, then it would get that stat, but it would um, lower that stat a little bit, and then it would roll again, iterate again, find a new stat, blah blah, blah. Keep doing that until it has the power level that it should have. And then I talk about pets. Testing combat without pets was something that I was doing about a week ago, and I was like, this I could balance it like this, but it's going to be way off sync because pets are a um, vital component of combat. So it was actually quite simple to just randomly generate a pet that exists in our database at the level of our player, and then test combat that way. So yeah, we're in a good spot right now in terms of balancing combat. Skill balancing, mentioned that, and then I just showed you that pets are in the game, and then I also added this cooldown indicator. Yeah, thanks for watching.